Hi everyone, this is a video presentation on the river basin approach for Environmental Science 204. Let's first define what a river basin is. A river basin is basically an entire area drained by a river, including all the tributaries connected to the river. Um, this would lead towards a common outlet, which is usually a lake or an ocean or a marsh or wetland. And there are different activities across this river, be it construction or farming or basic um, ecological activities from the flora and fauna that live in the area, and all their activities would have an effect on each other. So there are interlinkages between ecologies. Um, and we had to ask ourselves, why use the river basin approach? Why do we have to look at development through the river basin and not in a micro or even in a smaller scale or a larger scale? Why use a river basin? Basically because river basin approach allows us for a holistic and systematic approach towards um, towards management, because it looks at the interactions between the upstream and downstream activities. So you're looking at the ecology, the economy, the social factors that are included, as well as um, different political and institutional factors that may come into play. Let's first take a look at the river basins in the Philippines. In the Philippines, there are 18 major river basins. This includes Cagayan de Oro, Central Cebu, Marikina, Pasig Laguna, and a host of other river basins, and they're all under the control of the River Basin Control Office, or the RBCO, which is under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. Fun fact, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this because I heard this somewhere, and that is the Philippines is one of the only countries, if not the only country, that distinguishes between a watershed and a river basin. In essence, all of the country's watersheds are actually microbasins, because if you look up the definition of what a watershed is in other countries such as the U.S. or in Europe, a watershed is basically just a small river basin. So, fun fact, but please check. Sure. So why is the river basin approach so complex? First of all, as we said earlier, that it includes different ecosystems, and these ecosystems have interlinkages between each other, and the activity that's done in the upstream has an effect on downstream communities. So, for example, if you have a coastal city and you start to build construction up in the mountains, if their waste goes towards the river, this could have an effect on the rural areas, and that could have an effect on um, the production of farmland, and that would lead to lower quality products for the city. And that's just one of the interlinkages between different ecosystems, but they all play a part in trying to manage. Secondly, the size. If you take a look at this, for example, this is the Amazon River Basin, and the Amazon River Basin is huge. It encompasses multiple countries and is connected to a host of different rivers. Now, I know the Amazon River is not comparable in size to some of the rivers we have in the country, but it gives us a perspective of just how large and how problematic it could be um, to manage a river basin of this size, let alone one that's really small. And another one is that there's actually no um, one approach towards river basin management, because each river basin has different issues. For example, river basins in the Philippines have different issues to river basins in other countries, and river basins in for example Luzon could have different institutional and political factors than ones down south in Mindanao. So you can't look at river basins all in with one systematic look or one codified look. You have to look at it differently, because we have all these different factors going towards our river basin management. But looking at ADB, Asian Development Bank, they have actually created 10 golden rules on river basin planning. And now, I don't agree with all of them, and I'll tell you why when we get there, but at least it gives us an idea on how to look at river basins and how we should approach them uh, when we look at how to manage them. So first of all, number one golden rule is to develop a comprehensive understanding of the entire system. Now, as you said earlier, um, to there's such a complexity to river basin planning that we have to understand a lot of different elements before we start to develop an actual master plan for it. So you have, according to ADB, you have to take into account the climate of the country or the area, the landscape, the hydrological factors, ecological factors, institutional factors, economic factors, and of course social factors, because each of these are interconnected with each other. So basically, like you have um, the climate affects hydrological factors, ecological factors, and social factors. And if you don't take one into account, then there could be large implications to how the river basin could be managed if we don't fully understand what this means, what the entire system looks like before we go in head first. Number two, second golden rule of river basin planning is plan and act even without full knowledge, which is actually contradictory to the first golden rule, which is one of the things I don't agree with, as I said earlier. Um, this basically entails that we have to plan without knowing everything, which doesn't make sense to me personally. I think what ADB was trying to point out here is that inaction and stalling for time could lead to larger implications and problems in the future. And if we don't act now, then we might have larger problems in the future. So even if you don't fully understand something, then even if you don't fully understand the river basin itself, we still have to do something about it, even the small things. Again, I don't necessarily agree with this rule, but it's part of the 10 rules, so I included it. Number three. Three. That was backwards. Prioritize issues for current attention and adopt a phased approach for long-term goals. So basically, we have to look at different issues and again, much like the different factors that come into play in river basin planning, these issues also are interlinked. So you have technical, financial, institutional, and political issues that we have to look at, that we have to tackle when we are planning our river basin master plan. So it's not just about the environment side. It's not just about the economic side. We have to look at all of these problems in order to fully appreciate and understand the complexity of river basin planning. So, number four. The fourth golden rule from ADB is to adapt to changing circumstances. Now, we have different environmental, physical, political problems that may come into play when we are planning our river basin management plan. And they all have an effect on how we should approach it because, for example, climate change will require us to become more flexible when creating a plan. What might be there one year may no longer be there the next, and if we don't plan ahead or if we don't plan for these kinds of changes, then there might be huge implications for the rest of the plan or for the local community living in the area. So we have to ensure that uh, these things are met when it comes to our planning. Number five. Oh, we're halfway through. Number five. Accept that the basin is inherently iterative and chaotic process. And I think we already know that. I think that's something that's already a given that the entire thing is complex, it's chaotic, it is hard to deal with. But we have to understand that from the beginning, right? We have to know that this is what we're doing from the beginning, and we know that it's hard. Number six. So that's not right. All right. Anyway, develop a relevant and consistent thematic plan. Making sure that you include the intricacies of a certain river basin, because each river basin, as I said, is different and they all have different problems. So understanding which to prioritize, which problem to look at first, and which ones make the most impact when you develop them would lead to a better overall and more relevant plan when it's finally implemented. So you don't want to look at flood management when your area doesn't flood too much, and you don't want to look at water allocation when the water is abundant. Um, so these are kinds of things that we have to take into account. Number 7. My God, these animations are weird. Number 7. Address issues at the appropriate scale, but as in local plans under the basin plan. So, uh, as we know, the river basins are large and they encompass either multiple municipalities or even multiple countries. But looking at the Philippines, it may cover multiple municipalities or even provinces, and knowing which ones, identifying which areas first to look at may be more important than trying to fix everything at once. So which areas do we know need more attention, and which areas do we feel could be worked on in the future rather than now? Which areas do we need to work on now? Um, so understanding which are the issues that are more important would create a better river basin plan when we're trying to identify these key areas. So yeah. Number 8, engage stakeholders with a view to strengthening institutional relationships. So there has to be a cooperation between local governments, and secondly, we have to make the locals feel part of the process. Because first of all, if we're talking about cooperation between local governments, we have to understand that these different municipalities or provinces that are under a single river basin, if they don't work together, then you're never gonna get a well implemented plan. And secondly, if you don't make the locals feel part of the process, then they're not gonna care about the river basin and they're not gonna help out. These things, these social and institutional political factors, will lead to an overall better plan. You have to really engage both the government and the people so that they may be engaged towards helping and towards planning, because if you don't know the intricacies of how the governments work and how the people would react to different plans being implemented, then it's doomed to fail. It really is doomed to fail. Almost done. Number 9, focus on implementation of the basin plan throughout. If you're not working towards implementation, if you're only working on planning, then what's the point? ADB mentions that we have to look at the implementation when we're during the planning stage itself. Because if you don't implement your plan, then it is a useless plan. There's no point in it if you don't implement it. So everything that you're working towards should be towards implementation. Everything you're working on when you're planning should be towards implementation and not just towards a good plan. Because a good plan, even however amazing it is, if it's not implemented, is useless. So a plan that is not implemented is pointless, and everything done in the process of creating a river basin plan should be geared towards its implementation. And of course, number 10 is to select the planning approach and the methods to suit the basin needs. As I said earlier, basins are different. Basins are not exactly alike across different areas. Even within one country, they're not alike. And it's basically a mix and match approach of which method is best towards implementing a plan that would really benefit the basin, not just the environment, but also the social, economic, and um, even agricultural factors that may come into play when you're planning um, the basin. So with that, and again, just a final word. I don't necessarily agree with everything, like I said, especially rule number 2. I don't necessarily agree with everything that ADB states, but it does give us at least an inkling of how difficult it might be and how complex it is to create a proper river basin plan and how to a proper river basin approach. So with that, I thank you and